Hello and welcome to episode 7 of What Makes This Song Special. This week, as always, we'll be taking a song that reminds me of a special moment in my life, where I was the first time I heard the song. I'll talk a little bit about the band or the artist in question, and I'll talk about the singer from a sort of vocal coach point of view. And then in part 2, there'll be a separate video where I'll do a cover version of the song. So this week there are actually 2 stories. So I know the show is supposed to be about an episode in my life that a song reminds me of, but sometimes a song can have an impact in a couple of different places in your life, and it reminds you of both of those things. So I'll do one where I was the first time I heard the song, which is a wee story, and then there's another little story about something important that happened that also makes me think of that time when I hear this song. So I'll get into the first story, and this one goes back to 1991 for me. 1991, I would have been about 9 or 10 years old in primary 6 at primary school, and I had a teacher called Mrs. Johnson, who, unbeknownst to any of us, had an amazing lesson planned for us one afternoon. It'd been a great day already that day. I always remember one of the girls in my class. She was sort of the new girl. I think she started maybe a few months before this story. Her name was Lisa Adams, and she'd just given me a copy of Vanilla Ice, Ice Ice Baby, classic tune. I don't think there's a story that goes with that song, but and I'm definitely not going to do the rap as a cover version, but an amazing song, amazing part of history. I was over the moon with the tape. I always remember it was a cassette tape, and it was like the single, and on the front, and sort of, it was either silver or gold pen, it said Susie, and I always wondered who Susie was, and then later on, years later, I found out that it was her big sister's name, so I guess it was her sister's tape, and she probably wondered where her beloved Vanilla Ice, Ice Ice Baby single went, and if she's watching this, she'll now know I've just incriminated her sister for giving me the tape way back in 1991. Anyway, so it was a good day. I always remember that was a highlight of my day, getting a tape. And then after lunch, Mrs. Johnson, the teacher, she says, "Oh, I've got a wee bit of a different assignment this afternoon, boys and girls." She gave us all a jotter, a piece of paper and a pencil, and we were to write down our feelings and emotions. And she played a song. She said, "I'm going to play a song. It's a new song that's out, and I'm going to press play." She had this thing. It was like we called it the Coomber. I don't know if that translates out with Scotland or out with the UK, but it was like a tape player with a speaker built in that every classroom in Scotland at one point had. And she played the song. So she played this song. It was Wind of Change by the Scorpions. I had never heard the song before. I think it must have just actually been very recently out at that point. And we were to just be quiet and listen to the song 3 or 4 times on repeat, and we're to write down what emotions were evoked and what we thought the song might be about. We were to listen to the words and talk about what we thought the song was about. So I remember sitting there in the classroom, and I felt this lump grow in my throat, tears well up in my eyes, and I couldn't really describe it. I was tingly and shivery, and I now know that music can do that to me all the time. And I suppose at that point I hadn't really experienced that. I'd loved lots of different music and bands and things like that before, but that's the first time I remember like emotionally feeling something from hearing a piece of music that didn't really mean anything to me at that point. It was just a new song that I'd heard, and I remember feeling like I wanted to cry, but I couldn't because I was sitting at a table full of my peers, my friends, girls that I probably fancied in primary school, and all those types of things going on, and I didn't want to embarrass myself. So I remember putting my head down and just focusing on the paper, and trying so hard for nobody to realise that I was getting really emotional listening to this song. There were lyrics in it like, "We could be so close like brothers," and it made me think of me and my brothers and the adventures we'd already been on at that point. We'd lived and travelled we'd lived in and travelled all over Europe, to some of the places even that the song was referencing, and which we'll talk a wee bit more about later on in the video. But yeah, I remember just being really, really emotional, and panicking that everybody in the class was going to see me sort of wet-eyed and lump in my throat and goosebumps on my arms, and so yeah, I focused really hard on just talking about what I thought what emotions I was feeling from the song on my piece of paper, hoping that the teacher kept that to herself, and of course the next day she did read it out to the class and gave me a shiny gold star and said that mine was the best, so I was really chuffed. Didn't always get that kind of those types of plaudits in school, so that was quite a nice feeling. But I didn't really want her to read out to the class what I'd written, because I'd kind of written about my emotions and all those types of things. Anyway, I don't remember being slagged off for it too badly, and I don't think anybody at the time realised that I was pretty much crying listening to this song on repeat in class. So I remember that evening I ran home and I said to Mum, "You've got to hear this song, Mum. There's this amazing song that the teacher played us today at school, and it's so good." But again, this was before the days of being able to just jump onto Spotify or Apple Music or YouTube and find the song and play it. So we had to sit. There was a radio show that used to be on the radio. Now I'm trying to remember what it was called. I'm sure it was like the Rock Radio Show or whatever it was. And so I remember sitting that night listening to the whole show just to wait for them to play Wind of Change by the Scorpions so that I could press record on the tape deck on my wee Ghetto Blaster, and have a copy of the song, because I couldn't wait till the weekend to go out and buy it. So I eventually had a copy of the song. So I remember just the impact that song had on me, and I suppose looking back, that makes me realise that maybe that the music was always in me, like that became obviously what I've done with my life, is become a musician. So maybe that was the first time that I really remember feeling a certain way about a piece of music, that maybe hinted at the fact that I was going to be, in that world one day. It was going to become a massive part of my life. So there was a few things going on at the time. The lyrics in the song were talking about the various wars going on all over Europe, and it's about the USSR and the sort of end of communism, and the Berlin Wall coming down, and yeah, Wind of Change is all about change, freedom, lots of different things. I think it was a kind of positive time, although I do remember at the time as well the Gulf War had just started. I remember that was all over the news, and I remember being quite an anxious kid. I used to worry about things all the time, and I remember we'd learned about World War II in school, not too far back from that moment. And then I remember coming home and seeing on the news that the Gulf War was happening and Britain were sending troops in, and I was so scared that World War III was going to happen. I remember really getting very, very concerned about that in primary six when I was a kid, and that song seemed to speak to me about things like that as well. So so that's part one of the story. That's what it reminds me. That's where I was the first time I heard the song, and I specifically remember that first part where you hear Klaus Meine whistling. I remember that just instantly evoked some emotion and reaction in me. So that was part one. Part two, years and years later, because what happened with Wind of Change was, I don't know, I must have lost that tape, and I never ever bought like a Scorpions album or anything like that. So I think what happened was I just almost forgot about the song after a while, and 10 years passed, and I was in a band at the time called Vici. It was one of many incarnations of that band, but the band Vici, and I think we were trying to kind of revamp the band with some new band members. So there was an evening where there was me, Davy Monroe, who was the guitarist, Gordon Hall on bass, and we were recruiting a piano player because I used to play piano, but I wanted to kind of run around the stage and be a bit more of a front man. So we were trying to get another piano player in, and I'd played, and there's a few stories with this guy as well, but Scott Hanvey, who was a fantastic piano player. Scott decided to come along for, I think we called it an audition, but it was really just a jam. And we sat in Davy Monroe's his attic bedroom conversion. He turned it into like a wee studio, and we had the Velux window open, and we bought a crate of beers and a case of wine, as you do when you're trying to recruit a new band member, and we drank a ridiculous amount of wine and beer, and then we decided at about 2 o'clock in the morning to go for a wander around. And I remember walking, strangely enough, I'd moved so many times, moved house so many times since then, but we were in Beachlands Drive in Clarkston in the south side of Glasgow, and we walked from Beachlands Drive round the corner to Flinders Avenue, which was actually where I was living when I first heard Wind of Change, when I was in primary 6, before we moved to Italy, which I talk about in episode 3. But so we ended up walking down there 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, drunk as skunks, wandering around just chatting and trying to kind of sober up, I think. And we ended up in Flinders Avenue. I remember looking in at my old house and thinking back to those memories and the people that I used to play with in that street. And it's a street that I don't really go down very often. It's like a cul-de-sac in the middle of, a small village, so it's not like I go there very often. So I remember just being quite nostalgic and walking around there. And then the next morning we woke up, went for breakfast, and on the way back we went into a newsagent's at the Shedden roundabout, and there was like a small television in the corner, and the planes had crashed into the Twin Towers. It was 9/11. It was the most bizarre moment that I think nobody will ever forget, who was alive at that time. And I remember, like, just, you almost can't believe it. You just, it was one of those surreal moments. What's happening, and that can't be right. And we walked back to Davy's house. Everybody went their separate ways apart from Davy and I. And we went back to Davy's house, and I remember Davy's mum saying, "Oh, that's it, World War III started, you boys are going to get called up," because we were about 18 at the time, 19. She was like, "You're going to get called up, this is it." Oh, and she was really freaking out, and of course I was freaking out, thinking, oh my god, are we going to get called up? Are we going to get called up? Is World War III happening? Is this? And we went up to Davy's loft, where we'd been the night before, trying to rehearse and jam some new songs, and we opened up the window, and for some reason Davy said, "You know what we should do? We should sing a song out of the window to, pay respects to the people who have died today in this tragic, terrible, horrible thing that obviously 9/11 and the Twin Towers coming down was." And we decided, he decided, he said, "Oh, do you know the song Wind of Change?" And I thought, oh god, I've not heard that song in so long. And David pulled out the guitar, and we just played it from start to finish. We remembered every lyric. He threw in some harmonies, and we sang it out of his window, looking over Glasgow, sort of looking at the skyline of Glasgow and thinking about what had just happened in New York, and we sang Wind of Change. So now when I hear the song Wind of Change, I always think of that day in primary 6 when I first heard the song and I held back the tears, and I always think about the day that the Twin Towers came down, and we sang that wee dedication to the people in New York out of Davy's window. So that's the two things that I always think of when I hear this song. It's a really special song. It's if you haven't heard this song, obviously I'm hoping you're going to when you click on part 2, but listen to the original as well. There are so many great versions. Actually, in preparation for this episode, I kind of went back and I was on YouTube looking at some of the different versions that there are, and there's some amazing, even recent live versions where the whole crowd are singing along and there's people in the crowd crying. It's just, I think it's one of those songs that really, I think because of the lyrics, and I will talk a wee bit about the lyrics just now, because it's an important song for so many reasons. But it was recorded for 11th studio album, believe it or not. I mean, the Scorpions had been around since the late 60s, and there were many incarnations of that band, but the sort of incarnation at the time that had Klaus Meine. Klaus Meine was the singer, and Klaus is getting amazing. We'll talk about Klaus's voice in a wee second, actually. But the lyrical idea came to Klaus when they were actually touring in the USSR at the time. He was sitting in Gorky Park, which he references in the song as well, on a summer night, looking at the Moskva River, and he said it was about the winds of change, how larger world events can affect individuals' outlooks in life in the future. It was about the fall of the USSR, the fall of the Berlin Wall. But ultimately it's a song about change, the wind of change. It's a song about, as well as political connotations, it's transitions to the big bad world, realising your dreams, leaving friends, starting something new, meeting new people, etc, etc, etc. You know, it's about so much. It's about freedom, really, you know. And so the band had written this. I think Klaus Meiner's he was the one that wrote the song. The band, the Scorpions, were formed in 1965 in Hanover, Germany, by Rudolf Schenker, who was a guitar player, fantastic guitar player. And I think he's been the only constant member. It's been one of those bands that people have come and gone and been replaced and come back and all that kind of stuff, which you get with a lot of bands when they have to, you know, last for however many years that is. I mean, that is 65, 75, 85, yeah. I mean, he's talking like nearly 50 years. It's incredible. Incredible longevity that band's had, albeit with some differing band members. So, yeah, I think we'll talk a wee bit about Klaus Meiner's vocal style. Klaus he's got a sensitivity in his voice. He's a really beautiful singer. Even though he's got that sort of harsh German accent, which I hope my German friends won't take offence at, but German, a bit like the Scottish accent. The German accent is quite a harsh accent, so it's not always the most poetic or musical of accents. I think that's why a lot of opera, you know, if you look way back, a lot of the first ever songs and operas and things were always written in Latin languages, particularly Italian, just because it flows so well for song, for music. But the Scorpions, although they were German, most of their songs were sung in English, and he didn't have that harshness that you can get in some German accents. It was very, very soft and really sensitive voice, beautiful. He could also belt out a big rock vocal. So although he was a really tuneful, you could imagine him singing in a choir, and then they would sing, you know, a big rock track, and all of a sudden, you know, he's got that big 80s rock voice. Huge range, very, very, very good range, and known for his sort of really polished delivery. His breathing technique, very, very good, very compressed, and connected up in the higher notes, but quite breathy and quite disconnected in the lower notes, which actually makes for quite an interesting tone. I think quite nasal, quite kind of a lot of nasality, and yeah, I think a lot of that's due to kind of nasal, what we call in singing nasopharyngeal mode or twang mode, and then quite a lot in the mask, kind of across the bridge of the nose, but bags of like character and emotion in his voice. Really can, you know, sing like a choir boy. And belt out a rock vocal. So great vocalist, and still singing really well. I heard a sort of pre-COVID lockdown live video of theirs yesterday on YouTube, and his voice is still really, really fantastic, really for his age and for the amount that he's toured over the years. You know, he's been doing this since his 60s. He can still sing. He can still sing original key. He hasn't had to drop any keys. Really impressive. So that's a wee bit about Klaus Meine and the Scorpions. And I suppose that's the end of today's story, or stories. I give you a double story today, so a wee bonus. But hope you enjoyed the episode. As always, if you want to get in touch regarding singing lessons, vocal coaching, give us a wee shout, even just in the comments, and I'll send you an email address to send any questions to. And please like and subscribe and share. Hit the subscribe button, whatever that is on the computer, and hit part 2 for my cover of Wind of Change. Thanks so much.